Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard with your host, Bill Stierle. And boy, I'm really excited about this discussion we're going to have today, Bill, about truth and news reporting, because I'm wondering if there is much truth left in news reporting, at least in television news reporting. I'm even scratching my head as to how we got here, but I'm betting you can help shed some light on that, Bill.
Yeah, Tom. I mean, this whole thing regarding truth and news reporting is really is challenging, because we've got to now, in our current environment, not only hear the news, but we have to go back and check to see where it is on the level of truth. How much is it? A 6 out of 10 truth? Is it a 4 out of 10 truth? Is it a 7 out of 10 truth? Where is it on the truth piece? And what winds up happening is there's what news has turned into is a battle for the amygdala, a battle for the fight, flight, and freeze, a battle for validation. It's a battle for branding. That's where news has shifted to, whereas if I said, Tom, what would you prefer, Coke or Pepsi? Well, that's a brand battle between two different kinds of sugar water.
Right.
Do you like it this way or like it this way? Wait a minute, they're two different sugar waters. So that's the taste of it. So if news isn't held to the standard, then it's opinion. And when can something become opinion and still be on a newscast? Can you have an entire newscast dedicated to opinion and still call it a newscast? No, you call it Fox and Friends. It's not a newscast.
Yeah,
they
or
get to say what they want.
Or it might also be, the Rachel Maddow show or something. I mean, I think a lot of these shows are really injected with opinion and are maybe based on opinion. Now, they do bring some reporting and facts into it, but there seems to be a big difference between the television news and the newspapers and even the online news, because I see browsing newspapers, if there's an opinion piece, they spell it out. This is an opinion piece. Same thing on online news. If you look at CNN.com or something like that, or a number of other outlets that I personally see trying to stay in the place of integrity and identifying the difference between, hey, we're reporting on something and these are the facts we have at the time, the who, where, why, when, what, right? Versus this is what I think based on what I'm seeing, and they're called out as opinion pieces. But they don't do that on Fox and Friends or on, the 24-hour cable news networks, do they?
No, people should know is what they're getting away with.
People should know
that it's an opinion piece.
Mm. And I think over the years, maybe when Fox started out, I believe they had a lot more what I would call fair news reporting and trying to show, things more objectively. But over the years, people at Fox News in particular, who were those voices of reason, either got pushed out or were frustrated and disheartened and left. I mean, you think back to Chris Cuomo, who went to CNN. Who's the one that left recently? Is it Shepard Smith or somebody left
Yep, Shep
Fox
Smith,
News?
yeah.
And he was one of the, the only people to really try to call a spade, really. And
Yeah.
not just be another mouthpiece for the Republican Party or the president.
Yeah, that's right. We used to have in news media a law, a guideline for how news is going to be categorized. And these are the things you need to say. And once you're outside that, you can't call yourself a news thing. You can't be on a news channel, because that's what we would say here is fitting it. You've got to provide this dual piece to it so that there's a reported both sides, and you can't use a narrative of this is what the other side is saying, they're wrong because they're saying it this way. Look at that and use language of labels or judgments or criticisms, or use language that caused the listener to get riled up. Couldn't really do that. And that was one media executive talking to Ronald Reagan to get it changed.
Really?
Yeah, there was one, and I can't remember the entire story fully, but it was one person from the ask that law to be changed, and Reagan changed it. It was under Reagan that took place, and there wasn't the big fight or the big pushback or the votes that were needed to keep the thing in place that was needed for the real fair and balanced narrative to show up. So
Wow.
So we've got what we got now. So that's been really very, very problematic. So ever since there, so what's that, 30 years, 30, 40 years? Right?
Yeah,
30, 40 years. So that's the degrading of it. And what happens is that certain mindsets that get fixed on right, wrong, good, and bad to attach to this is my dogma, or this is my belief structure, and it's fixed. They can get hijacked by any kind of propaganda you want to, many types of propaganda that you can put in front of them. It's not just any. There's certain types of propaganda, and it's propaganda, again, we've went over this before in past episodes, it's the promotion of the faith. That's where propaganda came from. It's a Catholic term. It's a religious term. It's I'm going to propagate the faith. I am going to propagate this message, the good news of Jesus, of Christianity, and
I'm going to spread the word, they would say, right?
I'm going to spread the word.
Yeah.
This is because I had an emotional experience with my prayer. It made a difference for me. It changed my life. Now I'm okay with the mistakes that I make or the judgment, and I get forgiveness this way. And so all those propagated messages then get to be reinforced in a person's place of worship. This is what we stand for here. This is our belief.
Well, in some ways, does it seem that the divisiveness in this country and the way that people are receiving their, I'm going to call it information, maybe?
That's
I mean,
good.
news
That's right,
/ information,
yeah.
right? Because we've seen on maybe that the boundaries of what is news have been blurred, and what's acceptable has shifted. That in some way our the news outlets a bit like religion? Are people worshiping their side to an extent?
Yeah, their belief structure, it's moving in their direction as it's, and this is why other countries have a hard time, because they're not welcoming a diverse group of beliefs. They're an exclusion for people of other faiths. They're not tolerant of other people's spirituality in the place. One of the things that's unique and was unique about America is there was an acceptance and a tolerance that you could practice any kind of religion you want here, and you also got to follow these other rules here in government. Some people go like, no, we want this religious rules over here to be the governmental rules. So it's
Yes.
like, well,
Well, it's tough. It's kind of
that's not
tough.
this country.
It's kind of tough in America to have freedom of religion and separation of church and state, which is what it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
You
You
start
want, yeah, you want those
getting
two
confused.
things. Yeah, that's and I mean, you saw the convolutions of the, you know, the person reading, you know, the 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 Bible and quoting the story of Jesus and how he's being prosecuted and making that having similar narrative to what's happening to Trump. And, there's different things going on there. They're really kind of not the same. And are we going to use Bronze Age justice? Or are we going to use our modern rules and the interpretation of those rules to govern this nation where I guess Imperial Rome would be a model, that there's the governor of a territory that gets to decide about the accusers? And no, we don't do that. We put 12 people in a box. We let them decide. We try to get impartial people, not people with a stake in the game, to make the judgment. So, I mean, right now it's who has the money to pay for people to have stake in the game. We don't. And now all of a sudden we're seeing at the highest level of both the Senate as well as the Supreme Court. It's, I'm putting impartial people in there. I'm putting partial people in there, not impartial people. I'm going to put people that have a belief structure and a mindset that favors this mindset that's not in alignment with, my belief structure. It's just not.
Well, Bill, so one of the things that I am seeing and am concerned about is I think that the general viewer of our modern television news programs may not really have awareness of the truth scale and awareness of how far away from truth some of the things they're hearing are. Let's go back to the 80s for a minute. And I remember distinctly watching a news program like the Today Show, which had at that time Tom Brokaw and Jane Pauley on it as the hosts, or an evening news program like Walter Cronkite, CBS News. I'm old enough to remember Walter Cronkite. I'm sorry to say, but
Me too.
I am. And at that time, these news correspondents, anchors, whatever you want to call them, were very careful not to express any personal opinion. In fact, it was really well known when one of them expressed an opinion, there was actually some consequences for that they were reprimanded and maybe suspended. Yeah. But now if you look at something like the Today Show with, Savannah Guthrie or Fox and Friends with those people, I mean, there's a lot of opinion injected into it. They're not afraid to express their opinion. In fact, in many ways, it's encouraged.
That's right.
We're in a whole different place when it comes to news, aren't we?
Yeah, news is entertainment that gets ratings that we can get paid from. So, like, there was a movie a long time ago, Sally Field's Newman, Absence of Malice, in 1972. It was all about how someone's opinion can move its way to the front and get like wildfire, and then all of a sudden it's proven to be not true, like not at all. And the reporter just took the story and went in the direction that they wanted to. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then the consequences was their job and, and stuff. I mean, now you see someone fired and then 6 months, a year later, they're on somebody else's news show with little consequence. They're on somebody else's channel.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that that's like really all that terrible, but it's also terrible that it's, I'm not saying, you got to punish a person, to infinity and beyond, to exaggerate a little bit, but it's the hit that a person, takes, is that, it's very, very challenging, because there's an offense that, if somebody says what the news is and reporting what that news is, they're staying close to the fact, but the ratings won't be as high. You'll notice that there's no mystery that our president is interested in ratings. And he
Oh,
actually calls CNN loser show, poor ratings. It's like, it's poor ratings because it's not hype. And he's proving right now that hype wins elections. That's what he's proving. And
yeah.
hype is going to actually overcome justice, is what he's doing right now.
Well, that's interesting, and I want to go with that for a second. The recently, during the impeachment trial, the House managers presented what they call opening arguments, which I find kind of an ironic term, because it's actually a whole lot of the meat of the trial. It's not just an opening argument, but they did opening arguments for 3 days during the week, during the business week. And then it came the defense's term for opening arguments, and it started on Saturday. And did you hear this? There were tweets from the president and all this news coming out of the White House that they weren't happy that the president's defense was starting on a Saturday, when the ratings would be so much lower, much fewer people would be watching. And you're right, the president is all about hype and ratings. He knows it very well, very experienced in all this, and he wants attention.
And with that attention, it's exposure for his brand. I'm the good guy. I'm a good guy. I'm a rich guy that fights for you. I'm not a rich guy that takes advantage of you.
Right.
I'm not a politician that says one things, but when they get in there, they can't get anything done. See, he's getting something done. The problem is what he's getting done is illegal. That's the problem. So, but I'm fighting for something. And if I have my lightning rod, Joe Biden, if I have the lightning rod, and that's the president's instinct, nobody else in the field can beat him except for Joe Biden. That's his emphasis. If I take out this guy, the other ones are in trouble. I'm not going to let this guy get momentum. And he's right. I mean, he's right from the perspective of, he's done the damage already. Biden is, kind of like,
Oh yeah, the
the way in
brand
the
damage
polls.
has been
Brand
done.
damage of Joe Biden is nice guy, but right now there's a question in people's mind right now. Many hundreds of millions, no, tens of millions of people, I'd say at least 10 million people, believe that something with Joe Biden and his son happened in the Ukraine that was illegal or was unethical, let alone Trump's family doing all these, unethical things. It's their side has it, and now that allows us to demonize the other side. And it's nothing like calling somebody else on the playground, well, you're a bully. No, you're a bully. No, you're a bully. And then the person that's not a bully going like, how did I become a bully all of a sudden? Well, he just transferred his brand to you. It's because you were arguing with the bully about being a bully. It's really weird, but that's what propaganda does. That's what messaging does, is it sticks inside the person's consciousness. That's why you don't see one Progressive Insurance. How many times do you need to hear? 15 minutes.
Right. Well, that's branding. Repeat it and repeat it and repeat it till it's all people remember.
Yeah. You know what? It could save you.
Yeah.
That's an anticipatory. Yes. Go ahead.
Well, yeah. What, 15% or more, right? That's
right. So that's it's the filling in of the brand message. It's like, well, we're going to change our brand message. Huh? What are we going to do? All of these flyers, save them. We'll lose them, use them later. It's like crazy, but that's what branding is, messaging.
Well, and at some point though, so let's go with this messaging for a minute, and the brand messaging and changing it, because there's been a lot of changing of brand messaging going on in recent days, where when you had the president's defense in the impeachment trial, their message was there was no quid pro quo. There was, he was just, going after corruption. He wasn't going after Biden. That's their whole message. There was no quid pro quo. There was no this for that. But then the revelations have come out that John Bolton is on record saying, oh yeah, the president withheld the security assistance of nearly $400 million because of, in exchange for, leaning on the Ukrainian president to launch investigations into the Bidens in particular, not just corruption as a whole. And of course, the other talking point the Republicans have been saying, the president's defense has been saying for a long time is, well, there's nobody with direct knowledge. We haven't heard from anybody. It's all been second or third hand that we've had witnesses, no firsthand witnesses. Now you got a firsthand witness who has not testified yet, admittedly, at the time we're recording this, but is on record in a book saying this is what happened. And so then you see the president's defense narrative, his team defending him, shifting, saying, well, even if it was a quid pro quo, it doesn't rise to the level of impeachment. So backtracking, trying to change the story that, to maybe be ready to admit that he did that, but then saying, so what?
Yeah. I mean, there's a so what. See, they're actually prepping. See, they're just getting ahead of the story. The propaganda is just getting ahead of the story, which is John Bolton finally having enough, or finally realizing his brand damage is going to take place, and he's going to be worse off by being quiet. See, he's going to lose all of his mid support for his beliefs. His hardliners are going to stick with him, but all of John Bolton's mid support, will evaporate. And, he'll be a commentator on the news one day, as if that's news. But
and he was in 11 years on Fox as a contributor. And have you seen how they have now shifted from, he's a respected former cabinet member, administration official, person of integrity, and now that he's at odds with the president, Fox News is throwing him under the bus.
Absolutely. That's all they're preloading propaganda in order to, get the storm to pass, and, you might as well damage him than damage the president or damage the party. And the party's lost its, it's lost its 15 to 20%. It's, it's struggling a little bit, that there's the 15 to 20%, and seeing how they're going to get that back is really tough, because there's this entire category of people that are moving away from this Republican vote into this independent vote, which is kind of how Clinton got elected when there was Ross Perot and George Bush and Clinton all on the stage at the same time, the conservative vote got split with Ross Perot and
George
George H.
George Herbert Walker Bush. I remember that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he got split and Clinton got elected, and the vote split. So you haven't seen that on the stage again. Is an independent on the stage again? Why? Because the Republicans aren't going to have any part of their vote getting split.
Yeah,
Now,
because their constituency is already inherently on the decline in America, just as the way population is shifting and ethnically and immigration wise. The Republican, you know, typical. I guess the largest demographic of Republicans are older white men and women to a degree. I mean, not
yes,
exclusively by any means, but certainly that's their
sure.
largest demographic, which is in decline as
Yeah.
baby boomers are retiring and dying, and then there's so much more coming in that are in the African American community or the Latino community. It's their brand is already, I guess, their ranks are dwindling and they are struggling, I would think.
It's hard to sell conservative values when there's not real economic support for conservative values. Like if the Republicans really wanted their ranks to grow, they need to take a hard turn to help the middle class. And they're just not in that mental space to do that because they've been demonizing and undercutting the middle class for 40 years. So if they want their ranks to come back, make it stable for Americans to have a living wage and get a vacation a year, not have to work 2 jobs. If the Republicans want to come back, don't just give lip service to it. Do it. And their ranks will grow just fine. There'll be all kinds of inclusion inside their party if they would just grow the middle class. But they can't even it's off brand right now. We've got angry, fundamentalist folks over there instead of help the people where they need to help, and so they don't have to work 2 jobs and they get a pay raise and they go buy more stuff in order to float more money to the upper 1%. It's like they're not even paying attention to the system, which is really upsetting. They don't even know how the system works.
Well, but they've been definitely trying to, I would say, pander to the middle class, especially with the tax law that was passed in 2017. That was sold to Congress, but the majority of American people, I guess, that was sold to them as, hey, this is for you. You're going to get more money in your paycheck now.
Yeah.
And, some of them did, some of them didn't. It was a very modest increase in your paycheck at the expense of our budget deficit, which now in the Trump administration the deficit is over $3 trillion, when President Trump said his economic policies, his tax plans were going to reduce not only the deficit but the national debt, and it's nowhere in the neighborhood of that, which is going to have huge consequences for the middle class going forward, because somebody's going to have to pay that bill.
Yeah, it'll come down, when the next administration or the administration after comes down. It'll come down again when the new tax, there'll be some relief on the debt. How do we get the truth of how debt works is that most people are in debt. The problem with being debt is you don't want the debt to be so big that all of a sudden it bankrupts, the country, so you don't want that to take place, because that's where the depression sits, is that the dollar's not worth what it needs to be worth overseas and stuff. So um, lots of problem with economies. It's holding up an illusion of value. So it's and when we talk about news reporting, they're just fighting for that imprint. And you could even say that what you and I are doing is fighting for an imprint. We're fighting for, here's a healthy discussion about truth. That's what we're fighting for. Here's a healthy discussion about that. If something is an opinion, it doesn't, through repetition, become a fact. But that's what's happening. Through repetition, it becomes a fact.
Or becomes a belief, for sure, right?
Becomes a belief. See, just look at two phrases: witch hunt and hoax. Those are belief. Those are belief terms. A witch is something that is a religious dig. It's not a witch hunt. There's no witches. Witches aren't real. That's belief stuff, because
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of literally what the Catholic Church did with all its holidays, is put them next to pagan holidays and then propagate them. I mean, gosh, I hate to say it, people that, Jesus was born in early February. He wasn't born in December. It wasn't the 25th. It's just next to the solstice. The winter solstice is where the pagans used to worship on December 21st. And they put Christmas on December 25th to take that population and throw a bigger party over here. Tom, have you ever promoted a party? Yes, you want your people to come to your party and get into your faith and believe the things. And then Easter, what am I going to do with that? Well, I want to put Easter right next to the spring. That's why bunny rabbits are in Easter. How did bunny rabbits get there? That's a pagan religion thing. It's not Christianity, but they put it right next to it. So this is how human beings get pulled around. Oh gosh, I could do this all day. I could do this all day. Friday the 13th.
Oh yes.
Is a day of intimacy and sexuality and a beloved time for married couples, to stay home and be intimate with each other, because that was Freya's, the goddesses of love, worship day. So they changed the calendar so people wouldn't do that, because there was not as many Friday the 13th. I mean, it's the same news cycle. It's like, how can we, the powers that be, yank people's limbic brain, their amygdala, to our side so we have enough votes?
Then
it's
goodness,
discouraging.
It is discouraging. How I mean, obviously you and I are aware of this, our listeners are aware of this, and I think are approaching information we all receive with perhaps a healthy dose of skepticism to say, all right, what's the source? Is this really news? Is this opinion? Is this fact? Is it not? Where is this on the truth scale? The average person is not equipped with all of the skills and knowledge to be able to always see this. So where does that leave us? Again, with the best marketer is going to win the day.
The way capitalism is set up is the best marketer wins the day. If I go back in the field of time and just compare VHS cassettes to beta cassettes, beta was the higher quality, higher resolve, smaller, more effective, better machine, and yet VHS eclipsed and crushed that product.
It's a great example. You're right. It was due to marketing, and there were a number of things. Marketing was a big part
And
of it.
outsource and open architecture.
Right. Sony wanted to keep Beta, although itself didn't want to license and let other people make Beta machines, which
That's right.
was
That was a
clearly,
mistake.
as we look back in history, a big mistake for them.
Well, how do you do that in the political thing is it's really hard, because if you got two parties, all you're doing is you're branding. And the problem is that the Republicans have moved off of brand message as fiscal conservatives. They've moved off their brand message.
Oh, they're nowhere in the neighborhood of it, right? What was
No.
it when that's part of why I'm convinced that's part of why Paul Ryan left the House of Representatives, because he came in as a fiscal conservative, somebody who was not gonna vote for any new spending without cuts in what is already being spent. And
Yeah.
that just went out the window as he lost control of the narrative.
Yeah, he'll be back in 10 years to run for president. It'll make a pretty good run. I mean, he'll say, well, the party's back and that bad guy's gone now, and we're not like that anymore. And it's like, bull crap, you're still like that.
Yeah.
You're the one that didn't stand up to him in the past, and he just ducked and covered. I mean, it's really,
well, he took the most literal off ramp you could take to get out of government at that time, right?
he did. He took the off ramp. He sure did. He sure did, man.
We don't
He really
see
did.
enough of the
No.
existing Republicans taking that off ramp. We see them hitching their wagon to the Trump train.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a lot. That's very similar to VHS. Here's another model with a different bell and whistle, but it's still the machine that still doesn't work very well. It works okay, but it's not quality. It's just good enough. And is our government going to wind up in the dollar store? That's the thing that we've got to decide on. I like dollar stores, but it's not where I want my ethics in government to be.
Well, yeah, and we can't only have dollar stores. Actually, that's a very interesting marketing analogy to bring in, because if you've done any little bit of research on the phenomenon of dollar stores, especially in rural communities, is they've driven grocery stores with healthy food out of local communities.
Yeah.
And people are primarily, in some portions of America, are shopping, especially in the lower income communities and more rural communities, are shopping almost exclusively at dollar stores
And eating cat food.
And there's no fresh fruits or vegetables, and it's all preserved foods, and
yes,
this is contributing to our health crisis, right?
Right. And that capitalism kind of doesn't care about what's best. It really kind of doesn't. It's how does the dollar fall, and can I get a market or an interest about that product or service to get enough of an impact so the person gives me their money. They're not interested in capitalism. Is not interested in value as much, not as much. And yeah, people take niches and run with them. Mercedes, and there's plenty of business at the top end, but what happens is that middle group just gets crushed, and gets forced down.
Which is where the volume of people are. The vast majority of people are in the middle there. Yeah. Middle to low.
So with news reporting and kind of like it's like, how do you put a bow in propaganda other than listening to things and learning things that is going to give you a perspective without judgment? You and I put our opinion and judgment into things, but we're also giving the perspective of the good reason why people vote for and have voted for Donald Trump, because they believe in loyalty. They believed that this person, because of his enthusiasm and his popularity, he knows something about business, and therefore business principles get things done where governmental principles don't. And what is missed in the narrative is how much money is being used for candidates to spend most of their time raising money for the next election, not most of the time paying attention to laws in the government and writing good laws to help a solid nation stay stable. And we're becoming very top heavy, and you don't have to look at you don't have to look very far to, it's just happening quicker. We're becoming top heavy so quick, whereas Rome took 1,500 years and England took several hundred years before it topples, because it's the top heaviness of a system doesn't work. But
yeah, it's not sustainable long term.
Sustainable. So this is a little bit of, and so what eventually gets lost is a freedom, as Tom. That's what gets lost, is that once propaganda gets polluted in a person's mind, they don't even know that they're voting against themselves. They don't know. My sister doesn't know that she's voting against herself by voting Republican. She has no idea. She's in her 60s. She has no idea that when she's casting her vote, she's casting for a person that's going to vote to cut her Medicare. She has no idea that that's what that person's doing. She has a fantasy that these people, because her life is not fair the way she sees it. I've done everything I was supposed to do, and conservative. She doesn't know that, and doesn't believe that her vote is voting against her. Didn't know it. She doesn't know.
Well, and that's the the talented marketer that Trump is. And when he speaks, although outrageous things come out of his mouth off the cuff, he speaks in a way that a lot of people in this country really like, because it's different and refreshing. It's not the typical political speak.
Yeah.
And he, like you've said in the past, he creates a lot of sizzle and makes people believe he's on their side, rooting for them and going to fight for them.
Yeah.
But in reality, what he achieves
not.
is not in their best interest in general.
In general. Well, the freedom piece is what we could pick up next time. I think that if we talk about truth and freedom, we can now pull this thread forward from news reporting, and we could see how the freedom of speech and the freedom of information, kind of get, and that's how truth gets purchased too. And then it's literally, turning off the dial of freedom, and it becomes more about the way Russia is doing things, is that we're not letting people go. So, and then all of a sudden they're losing their freedom because they're just complaining and submitting and complaining and submitting and complaining and submitting. That's what they're doing, so.
Well, that'll be a very interesting discussion to see how, I mean, we have at the foundation of our system, freedom of speech, right?
We do.
But that freedom of speech may be endangering our freedom.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. It is. It is. So because our brain is getting hijacked because of it. Because I'm only going to look at people that are in agreement with me, that don't have a perspective. And I'd be happy to sit in a room full of Trump people and talk to them about how freedom is getting hijacked from them. You're not allowed to really actually have a free thought, because if they take away this choice, then you get to lose 5 other choices. It's like, what? Yeah, you lose it. So, all right, Tom. Well, this is good. I want to thank the listeners for staying with us and going through this complexity of how the truth and news reporting gets purchased this way, and it's been a lot of fun, Tom.
I enjoyed it. Thanks so much. I look forward to next time.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.